So the main thing that we want to talk about, and nobody knows this. This is the surprise. We had planned on talking, just Steve and I, about the research developments, and the big surprise is that the person responsible for this research has actually joined us on the call, and I'll be introducing her in just a moment. But in short, years of research has gone into what is now made the Aqua total charge the first foot bath that has been scientifically validated in a clinical setting. So that's a big deal because this is where the research scientists and academics play. So you can't pussyfoot around. You've got to actually show what you're doing, and that's what Marcy Purnell will be talking about, is the work that she's done, and it's in the field of bioenergy. There's a longer term for that. I'll let Marcy tell you that one. But in short, as many of you know, the Aqua is an energetic system. So the reason it works the way it does is because it imparts bioenergy, or that bioelectrical field is imparted into your body. So I don't know how well I put that, but that's the reason that the Aqua works. So at this point, what I'd like to do is introduce the person that we'll be speaking with today, and that is Marcy Purnell. She's currently a licensed family nurse practitioner who serves as an associate professor at the University of Memphis, the College of Nursing. She also practices at Stern Cardiovascular Center, where she functions as a nurse practitioner in both acute and clinical settings. So, Marcy, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Michael.
Great. So, Marcy, let's begin. Maybe I should ask, where did your impetus come for your interest in what you ultimately pursued as a doctorate in bioenergy?
Well, I actually had a friend get sick with breast cancer, and another colleague, nurse practitioner friend, told me she'd been researching some things that could be done for health, and she recommended that I try this foot bath at a local spa here in actually South Haven, Mississippi. And it's a suburb of Memphis where I've done all my work. But anyway, and so I went to this spa and I did the bath, and immediately I felt amazing effects. I had joint pain reduction, I had increased stamina, and I thought, what is this? And a sense of well-being. And so I left the spa that day and actually called a friend of mine and just was elated, thinking this is something pretty incredible. But then they were telling me that it was pulling toxins out of my seeds, and it had the color charts there. Of course, it was the Aqua. And something about me is just being a healthcare professional. I was a nurse practitioner at the time. I hadn't gone on to get my PhD yet. And I thought, well, that's not valid science. There's something that's going on. And so I got very intrigued and started getting on the internet, actually, and looking for the device to figure out what it was, what it did, how does it work. And I made a few phone calls and fortunately got directed back to Steve Walker, and they gave me his number and said, you need to speak to him. And so I called Steve, and within a few months, we finally connected and began to talk. And he began to tell me things that to me were almost laughable. I really remember laughing on the phone when he would tell me the plant growth enhancement and all the anecdotal reports across the globe for 10, 15 years at that time. And so basically I got a machine and started using it. He said, just start using it. So I did. I got a machine, and for about 3 or 4 months, I started noticing all the phenomena that he was reporting, things that I noticed with my own eyes, the plants, the things that started happening in my own physical health and the improvements. And so I thought, I've got to test this. And I tried several things. I was a nurse practitioner at University of Tennessee working in the clinical trials unit. And I thought, well, let me just run a trial for hypertension, being a cardiologist. So then I went on and decided, okay, I'm just going to take it to the microbiology lab. I'm going to do what MDs do with their pharmaceuticals, and I'm going to go see on a cellular level, in vitro studies, what is going on here. And so I approached the chair of microbiology, immunology, and biochemistry at UT, and we began on this journey. And I decided to go back and apply to the PhD program, and actually got a PhD in bioelectrodynamics, and which is how bioenergy affects living organisms and at a biochemical level that we can measure. And went and started this journey of trying to figure out if this, number one, did this harm a living cell? Was it something that would be beneficial long term? I know I felt good, but were these things going to be harmful over time, or would it be something that would be healthy? So I've been on the journey of testing at the cellular level down to the genomic level, and validating that this technology is an amazing technology, to say the least.
Okay, that's a great intro. At this point, I just want to ask if anyone who's on the chat could just type in, yes, I can hear everything. It sounds good. I can understand. I think it's working, but I always want to check just to be sure. So if you would, somebody just type in and say, yes, we can hear both of you. So, okay, Marcy, so let's take it a little further here. So you began what became your doctorate on a personal journey, and that was working with people, actually yourself first, and you've also done, I understand, some work with other people as well. And we could talk about that, but I did read one of your papers, and you did talk about the difference between the way that medicine is practiced as in general, and bioenergy medicine. There's a difference, and I did want to ask if you could give some perspective about where these origins were from, and what you could share about that.
Well, traditional Western medicine in the United States in the last 50 years has been driven by pharmaceutical therapy, which we all know is are chemicals that actually go in and try to affect the signaling pathway in the cell. And we all know that every pharmaceutical that we have has side effects because it's something that's foreign to the cell, and the cell has to process the foreign chemical. It tries to block or affect pathways, which can be an unnatural thing for a cell. It's Newtonian physics, particle theory, and it's very different from what we call quantum physics, which is a bioenergy application, which basically giving the body an energy form that it can use and just operate as it was designed to operate. It doesn't block the pathway. It doesn't have a foreign chemical the body has to process. It basically just gives the body more energy, like a battery charger, to work in the cell to function how it was designed to function. And therefore, there's no stress on the body and no stress on the cell. And pharmaceuticals we all know I'm not against pharmaceuticals by any means. I'm a practicing practitioner. And I know in a cardiology setting, if somebody walks in and has their blood pressure 200 over 120, I've got to use the pharmaceutical because they're at risk of a stroke. And I probably cannot do an energy application that's going to work that quickly. We've gotten so out of balance that we've got to do some things to get them safe. But then that's where medicine tends to drop it. They tend to just be out of balance and continually use pharmaceuticals, which can be counterproductive to health in time. But what I, as a scientist coming in, is not trying to destroy or try to criticize Western medicine, because I think we do amazing things. I think that the addition of bioenergy is an incredible adjunct that's going to offer such synergism and such health and wellness, along with the current medical therapies that are going to give us a path to wellness that we have yet to see.
Okay, thank you for that. So you mentioned that your path started with experience, and I wanted to ask if you could speak a little more. I mean, obviously, we'd like to talk a little about the research itself, because that's, as you say, where the facts are presented. But in your experience, but with both yourself and how the Aqua has worked for you, you could you share a little more of that, and also maybe some of the work that you've done with others as well.
It's for myself personally. I mean, it's the immune response. I could tell that I didn't get sick very often, or if I got a little scratchy for being in healthcare provider, you're around sick people all the time. And if I was exposed to something, I may have just a low grade version of it, and I did the bath. I've done the bath religiously for 8 years now, and I can see that I don't succumb very often. Now there are times, it's not magic. There are times if your body's stressed, like when I was finishing this PhD, that sometimes, you may get sick every so often. But I really saw immune boosting effects, relaxation, joint pain relief, increased stamina, what I call fourth quarter stamina, when you go to the gym and your body you feel like you can really knock a workout much longer or much more effectively. And also when I saw others, of course, the reports across the globe are amazing, but I've actually been working with people that have multiple sclerosis, all types of cancers, and these are things that the medical community don't recognize very well, because you have to have clinical trial data with all these diseases to get to have an impact. But for the individuals who use them, that it's very profound. But it's basically a sample size of one. But I've worked with patients with multiple myeloma, breast cancer, like I said, multiple sclerosis, liver cancer, colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, brain tumors, renal cell cancer. And we have seen some significant improvements in many patients. We will never say cure. And some of these patients are undergoing conventional treatment. I think it's a powerful adjunct with conventional treatment. Unfortunately, some patients have not had insurance and have used this solely and have had some pretty profound results as well.
Okay. I noticed that we have a couple of people that are saying that you're breaking up a little bit, and I just wanted to ask: if you're on a cell phone, are you in a place where you could get a little better signal, or move into a room or outside or something that would? Because it sounds like you're breaking up just a little bit.
Okay, I will try. I'm getting feedback when I'm talking, so that's kind of distracting to me too.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. That's kind of part of the game here. So I appreciate.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine.
I'm glad you can put up with it. You're doing well.
Yeah, I'm hearing myself. So if I sound like I'm stuttering, sometimes I'm hearing myself.
Right. Okay.
Is this better?
Actually, it would probably help you when you're answering, that you kind of just take your earpiece away a little bit, and that way it's not going to come right back at you. So when you pause, then put your earpiece back, and I'll go to the next question. So you mentioned a lot of different things that you've worked with people on. Is this in practice, or you have your own foot bath practice, or was this as a part of the research?
No, as a researcher, I have to really, this is the rub that I have. I have to actually, it's not treating anybody. These are people that have heard about the research that I've done and the anecdotal reports, who contacted me and actually bought a machine through Steve. And I tried to give them a little bit of encouragement, but I can't practice with it because it's not an FDA-approved treatment. This is something that they choose as an adjunct. Some of them, most of them clear it with their physician, and I don't follow them as a physician or a practitioner because I can't. I'm strictly in the cell lab right now, going and moving to a phase 1 safety trial, and actually in animal models. So this can no way be, I couldn't open up a foot bath treatment center or anything. That would be highly against what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to bring this into clinical trials for FDA approval, and I have to really draw the line. And I always tell people, I have no clinical trial data. I've even spoken to their oncologists multiple times, their physicians, and to say we have no clinical trial data. All I have is that I have in vitro studies that show that it does no harm to cells, that it actually relieves stress in the cell, that it actually has shown some effects against cancer in vitro. And there have been multiple anecdotal reports been used for 20 years across the globe. And patients have used this technology for multiple chronic comorbidities. And so I can give them the in vitro studies that I have done. I can give them anecdotal reports and tell them that I'm headed into safety trials. And they are taking it and using it on their own, because sometimes patients are they're in remission, but some patients that they've had the side effects of chemo, of numbness and tingling or nerve damage and different things, and they've actually used it and had as an improvement in those symptoms. And then some people use it actually for, I've had patients who have undergone cancer treatment and who have struggled with the radiation and chemo, the side effects, and they've used it and they've been able to tolerate radiation and chemo. That's what I'm so excited about, is that for the future of medicine, that we could actually take these baths and help people survive conventional treatment and have it work together for the good of the treatment. And then, so sometimes people stop the treatment and they do the baths and they kind of prepare their bodies and then are able to go back into treatment and go into remission from different things. And it's just been amazing to see. And then I've had patients who've had no insurance, bless their hearts, and they've had no other option. And so I get approached by them as well, and they've started doing the baths and had some phenomenal improvements in their symptoms and in their tumor sizes, and then some of them have even gone on, on insurance plans with some state help, 6 or 8 months later. And I firmly believe that it's helped them feel better and get to that point of actually being able to get an insurance. And then some patients, take it and use it initially at diagnosis, and it's, like I said, it's an amazing technology to relieve the stress of the chemo and the radiation and to help them heal from surgery. So these are all anecdotal reports, so I cannot, these are things that people have heard the technology on before across the globe, but seeing it myself drives me to continue to stay in the lab, do the work, and bring it to clinical trials. I'm getting ready to start a phase 1 safety trial. And once I get through this phase 1 safety trial, we show it does no harm, then I will head on into hopefully clinical trials for whatever I can get funding for multiple chronic comorbidities.
Yeah, that's great. One thing that I recognize in what you've said is that you have a very balanced view of healing, and that's that it's not just natural therapies and it's not just allopathic medicine, but that there can be a really good meeting of the two. And so that sounds like where you come from. I think that's just very refreshing to hear that. Let me ask you, so in the when you got down to starting the research, there was probably nobody telling you, hey, do this, try that. You were doing a lot of this by your own trial and error, right?
Exactly. That's what makes it so long. And funded it myself. I forgot, had to, when you go into a cell, things are expensive. And I met quite a bit of a resistance. It's really a miracle that I got this PhD through with this technology. And I was actually accepted to the PhD program at UT by a very progressive nurse scientist who was a genomic scientist herself, actually. And she was so intrigued. And I have to give credit to my mentor, Dr. Michael Witt. He actually let me in his lab. Here's this crazy nurse with this crazy technology that he knew nothing about. and and so I'd actually started doing some preliminary work in his lab at the time I applied. And so I think that with the progressive nurse scientist, actually, I got accepted. And normally people know how a PhD program works. Normally you go into a PhD program where you have a mentor who has a research line. And I didn't understand this when I went. I was very ignorant. It's a good thing I didn't, because I probably would have never done this. But normally the faculty member has a line of funding, and you go in and you spin off of their work, and they fund you and they pay for your PhD, and you work for them in the lab or in the do clinical trials or whatever you're getting your PhD, do your research. And so you have the funding there. You basically forward their line of work, then get your little piece that you can take in advanced science and get awarded your PhD. But I came into it with a device that nobody knew anything about and had no funding, and there weren't any faculty members that had any background in this. And it was a real disadvantage, to say the least. And so I was bound and determined. I actually failed candidacy the first time. You take a set of exams once you take your coursework. And I failed the exams because people really couldn't see the connecting of the dots of what this was doing at the time. And by the luck of the universe, or whatever you want to call it, about that time I failed, there started to be publications that hit the literature, which were crucial and critical, because you never can be out in left field in science, in the scientific world. You have to have one foot in the box. And these guys, some of these publications, started coming in with bioelectrical effects on cells. And one of them was Dr. Michael Levin up at Tufts University, and he does amazing work. But he started delving into it as well. And so it gave me some validity to a concept and a theoretical model that I could actually build on as I forwarded the work. And then was fortunate enough to pass candidacy, get accepted to speak at some conferences, and they started getting some foothold and gaining some ground. I was fortunate enough to get some funding through National Dissertation Awards, and as well as a fellowship at UT to begin to pay for this. And so it couldn't have gone any better for something that was so an uphill battle for science.
I was going to say, that it's not an easy area. Number one, it's not a traditional area that you would go in and do your research in. So, my next question was going to be, well, when you did get into that setting, what was the reaction of the professors, the doctors, when they started to see some of the results?
They were pretty astounded. I think, first of all, I think that, and I was astounded too, but we couldn't explain what was going on. And, we knew something big was going on, something powerful was happening to the cells from the cell data that they were seeing. And I think part of them was almost like, do you really believe this? Is this really real? But, and sometimes I even felt that way. But as I kept going through, and we really did know what was happening to the cells, cancer cells weren't growing and normal cells were growing fine. And what's called, how is this happening? So I went through multiple essays and did multiple things to try to find answers of, what is happening to the cells? Are they dying? Are they going into senescence? And so collecting all these data, and my mentor came to me and said, okay, now you're going to go into the genomics lab and you're going to do genomic analyses on these cells. And I was very much not wanting to do that because I knew it would be a challenge. And I looked at him like, seriously, I'm going to have to go in and do this, become a genomic scientist. So I was less than thrilled. But the committee, which, decides whether you progress and get your PhD or not, they were putting everything on him, because I had a committee that consisted of a biostatistician, 3 PhD in nursing professors, and then my molecular biology professor, who was my mentor. And so they were kind of putting everything on him to guide me since I was in the molecular lab. So as I went into the genomic work, it was such a growth experience. And I think because of all the proprietary stuff, I can't really go into everything that's happened with that, but I will tell you that genomic work was powerful and backed up everything anecdotally that we've seen for 20 years with this technology. And it's quite astounding, and it was very humbling. And I felt so honored to be here for hours and hours and go through this microarray and genomic, real-time genomic validations, and to see how the beauty of genomics and how it lines up with all the effects we're seeing.
I heard you, two major points you made. You had done in vitro cellular work with cancer cells, and you had also done genomic work, which is working with DNA. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, so
DNA expression. Yeah.
let's speak to a little both of those, just so people can understand a little better. Talk about the how you did the cancer cell analysis, what kind of observations you made, and whether you came out with a hypothesis as to why that was happening.
Basically, the cancer cells, all cancer stopped growing with this. We treated water, made media, and grew the cells in the growth media, it was reconstituted with treated water with the unit. It was actually a hypotonic saline solution. And we noticed that the cancer cells stopped growing and began to displace a phenomena that we didn't understand. It looked like possible cell death, programmed cell death, but we went through assays and showed that programmed cell death was occurring, and had a hard time showing that because I use cell flow cytometry, and there's a big cell flow cytometer that reads the fluorescence of cells, and these cells autofluoresce in every color spectrum. So I had to do some fluorescent microscopy to look to see for this staining that when the cells undergo the programmed cell death. But then I went on, we have cell cycle. It stops the cancer cell cycle progressing through a cell cycle, which we know cancer cells, they live to replicate. And I think the thing that we see that what I want to tell the world is that cancer cells are very sick. They're very weak. Everybody thinks cancer is an aggressive disease, and cancer is a disease of energy, of low energy. And what a cancer cell does is basically begin to turn off many, many pathways. Cancer cells don't want to make proteins. They don't want to communicate with each other. Cancer, like if you have a liver, all those liver cells are making proteins that makes the liver stick together and function as one organ. But when you have a cancer cell begins to grow, it doesn't make proteins to communicate with other cells. It doesn't care to. It's sick. It knows it's about to die, and it tries to just throw everything into into division. So what do you see when everybody thinks cancer? Everybody wants to go and kill the cancer. Well, unfortunately, sometimes we kill off everybody knows the normal cells. And so the normal cells respond to the chemo times much better than the cancer, because cancer is shutting down pathways. Normal cells have their pathways wide open, and they're working like they're designed to do. So what this technology does is actually make a cancer cell behave like a normal cell, and begin to behave more like a normal cell. And a normal cell, when it gets corrupt, that programmed cell death is built into our cells in a beautiful way. If the cell gets corrupt or gets sick, it can kill itself. And that happens all throughout our body all the time. Cancer is a natural phenomenon of low energy. But when you energize the body, then that cancer cell gets more energy. It gets happier. It begins to turn back on pathways that it turned off, and it kills itself.
So it's actually you would think that it's the cancer itself that kills the cell, but it's actually when you can turn on the functioning of the cell, then the cell normalizes and it can then die a natural death. Is that kind of how you're saying it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It can.
That's pretty wonderful stuff. So you didn't, maybe I missed it, but I'm just wondering if, as this research was going on with the cells, whether people said, I think the reason that's happening is because of the the bioelectrical characteristics, or did, were there other ideas? Was it pretty clear at the end of all that it was the bioenergy?
Yes, it is clear that it is the bioenergy. We did multiple testing experiments with the water to show there are changes that are occurring in the water. Okay, we're breaking ground into new territory too. You remember that we're a biochemical society, so all the assays that are designed right now are on a biochemical level. So we are measuring biochemical changes that are occurring due to a bioelectrodynamic effect. And so we do know that there's a membrane polarization change that we can measure, but that's based on ions, moving across the membrane. So we're measuring that. We did do some testing with that. So you have to remember that a bioelectric change occurs in 186 thousandths of a second. A biochemical change with a pharmaceutical occurs around 1 to 2 seconds. So we can measure biochemical changes. We struggle in science to measure bioelectric changes because they occur so quickly. 186 thousandths of a second is so fast that there's no lab in this world that can actually begin to do things that we need to develop further technologies to be able to do.
If I remember my my high school science, that you're talking that bioenergy moves at the speed of light.
Exactly.
Okay, that's pretty quick. So
to measure some of those changes, we don't have technology right now to measure changes that are occurring that quickly.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk on the other side that you mentioned that you had done genomic work with DNA. Now that's even more complicated area. So I'll ask you to kind of give an overview, but make it a layperson's explanation so we can understand why you were doing it and what you were looking for there.
We were looking to see if we could see any genomic changes. If you couldn't, then it would be hard to really validate the science, or difficult, because everybody wants to see genomic level effects. That's the society we live in today. And so we had no idea what we would see, if we would see anything. And I really think my mentor thought if we don't see anything on the genomic level, then it's going to be it's not going to go very far. And so it made me nervous because there were such profound effects anecdotally, and at the vitro level, I thought, oh no, what is this going to show? And we were both astounded because we had broad, very strong genomic changes. And basically, the DNA of the cell or what we were measuring is the protein expression, or the messenger RNA expression. And so when a cell goes and begins to, everything your cell does, or cell does, they have to make proteins. And they go and read the DNA to be able to, it's like the template to make the protein that the cell needs, whether it's insulin for a pancreatic cell, or anything a cell makes. And if you can think that a cell has, one little bitty cell has so many proteins that if you were to take one penny to represent every protein in one cell, the pennies would fill up every ocean on planet Earth.
Whoa.
And so you're talking about a multitude of proteins.
Wow.
So what we do is we go in and read what kind of transcriptional effects, or how is the cell changing, how they're expressing and making proteins and functioning. And that's what we're looking at. And what we saw were a cell, a human cell will have over 40,000 genes. So we were changing 1,700 genes in these cells with these treatments.
Okay, all right, stop there. That's pretty amazing. So you're saying that doing the treatment actually affects DNA?
Or it doesn't change DNA. It's DNA expression.
Expression. Okay.
Transcriptional effect.
Explain that, what that means, so that we can understand that that's a benefit.
Okay. When you have a cancer cell, like I said, their DNA can be corrupt. They can be, the way they read their DNA is corrupt. And so what this is doing is actually turning back on the cell's ability to transcribe proteins that it needs to function.
Okay.
Helps the cell make the proteins that it needs to function by being able to read the DNA and make the protein.
All right. Yeah. So it's like, it's kind of turning on function in the cell. That's what the, if we're going to put a real simple explanation on it, it is energizing the cell so that it can function properly.
Yes. And if the cell loses ability to make proteins, it loses ability to function.
Okay.
There's also something called processing of proteins. It's also affecting not only when you go and transcribe the protein, meaning that the cell will send nucleotides and line the nucleotides up to match DNA to make the protein, which is a template. It's almost like a recipe for the protein. But then once that protein is made, it's a long polypeptide chain of multiple what we call amino acids. But then the cell has to take and process that protein and make it functional for the cell. And so all this requires energy, and the cells really struggle with that as we age. That's what we call cell stress. As we get older, our cells lose the ability. They turn off the signals they can read the DNA, or they have trouble processing the proteins. And so when you have trouble processing proteins, you have Alzheimer's disease. You can have multiple aging things go on. The cell loses the ability to function. Cancer, of course, can ramp up certain things to help them fold and process proteins only that they need to replicate. That they don't continue to do everything that, if you have a liver cell, a liver does 500 things in the body. But a liver cancer cell will only do one thing. It will only replicate. It won't make the bile. It won't process the cholesterol. It won't, all the things the liver cell does.
Okay. So you've given a very good explanation from a clinical level. I think that a lot of people listening and watching would like to kind of bring it down to the level of, when the everyday, when they're using a foot bath. I know that you've probably done some, you've gathered information also on when you're doing sessions. What are, in different cases, how often do you use it? What's your, the level that you would operate it at? You probably come up with some valuable things that people might want to hear along that level.
Well, since I don't have clinical trial testing on that, I hate to even, I think the guidelines that are in place right now, I do some things at times, but I hesitate to say anything because I don't want anything to be taken out of context or to be, I don't have any clinical trial proof.
Yes.
And I'm doing assessments and things and watching labs and doing things. So, but until we get into clinical trials and we actually begin to develop the protocols and watch everything very closely, I really think that the standard guidelines of every, 48 hours, and of course, the same thing of under 7, we only treat if there's a really severe issue. Over 7, then you're going, 15, 17 minutes every other day. The elderly, we kind of space it out a little further if, but some people, I'm telling you, what I do find patients is patients would get an intuitiveness about them. And I've had cancer patients come back to me and they've actually altered their own schedule of doing it maybe every 36 hours or every 24 hours if they're having a really bad day, because they feel they need it and it makes them feel better. And I would say that that's gone well for many people, and I've not seen any harmful effects from that at all. But I can't make any recommendations from a clinical scientist standpoint.
Well, that kind of supports something that I've said for many years when people ask how often do I do it, that I've recommended they start with every other day. And then after a month or two that they actually use their own, the input that and the feedback they get from their body, and then an example of that, somebody says, yeah, I had, knee pain and I had trouble going up and down the stairs. Then I started using it and it went away. But then I stopped it for a couple of weeks and it came back. And so, that's the trial and error that you have to use when you're working with anything, including the Aqua. So at this point, I wanted to see if there's anybody who would like to put a question up that Marcy might be able to address. I do see one from Lauren, which says, were you able to measure the millivolts of the cell? And if there's a different way of explaining that, basically, I guess the charge around the cell, is there any kind of measurement of that?
Yes, I did measure that. I didn't get an actual millivolt because that requires a patch clamp, what we call a patch clamp setup. I did do a fluorescent membrane potential, which shows that it hyperpolarizes the cell. But the actual millivolt measurement, what we know about a cancer cell is that a cancer cell, if you think about 0 on a continuum, being a cell's very sick and it can't do any work. The membrane there's no differential across that membrane, meaning that cell, the membrane of the cell is the brain cell. It's what the cell uses. It has to get things into the cell that it needs, get things out of the cell. And so when we go on that membrane, they can take an electrode and actually measure. And what we see is a cancer cell will reside between 0 and -30, -40 on a continuum, meaning that that's kind of weak. A normal cell goes down down to about -70 to -90. So she's asking, have I measured the actual millivolts? And I have not. I did an assay, a membrane potential assay, to show that we moved that cell down the continuum, cancer cell. A normal cell came back to baseline with they didn't really fluctuate much. But a cancer cell, we did hyperpolarize the membrane.
Okay. We're getting several questions about different conditions, and I think I can speak for Marcy and say that, again, she's mentioned several times about anecdotal results, not clinical results or something that could be reported as, a cure for anything. So
right.
I'm not going to ask the questions related to specific conditions. But maybe you could speak generally, again, in an anecdotal sense about the improvements that the people that you work with reported.
I have multiple sclerosis who have what they call a lack of progression or an improvement in their disease. They don't have the weakness, their improved strength. I have people with wounds who have wounds healing quickly, post-operative wounds. Many athletes I know working with this, and especially people my age, and they're having surgeries and their scars are almost non-existent. Their post-op wounds are healing quickly. I have people with allergies and asthma reporting relief, COPD. I have, of course, cancer patients feeling better and tolerating treatments better. Let me think what else. Lowering of blood pressure. People who, their blood pressure normalizes better. Even with medications, they're better controlled if they're on medications. There's some people who are teetering on that pre-hypertension. These are just anecdotal reports. And I think, gosh, there's so many through the years. You hear, mental clarity, reduction in anxiety and depression. I do hear that. Clear thinking. I have noticed patients with what we call chemo brains. They feel like that it really helps relieve even the fogginess during their treatment. Trying to think. I haven't had anybody with Parkinson's or Huntington's or ALS use it, but there have been anecdotals with that.
Okay.
Um, I'm
If I might
trying to think.
interrupt, was there noise happening behind you when you were talking there, or was that on Steve's line?
I don't know who's on.
You didn't have any noise in your room,
I
right?
I don't have any noise here.
Okay. Well, Steve, if you're on the call, could you mute your phone, just so that we can keep the noise to a minimum? All right, I appreciate that. Okay, so other questions, please type them in, and I'll be glad to ask Marcy about that. Marcy, you said you were doing this for 8 years. How many of those 8 years were spent doing academic research?
I started in 2010.
2010. So it's now
So
2016. You
yeah,
really you stood the test of time.
it takes forever to do anything. Well, I remember that I've also worked full time through this program. It's been a journey.
Mm.
Um, I haven't had the luxury to just be a student. So I've worked 2 jobs and done a full time program.
So tell me what you mentioned that you would like to see more research, and I believe you mentioned that there's going to be you want to do safety trials to make sure that it doesn't have any negative effects on the human body, I guess, right? That would
Yes,
be
we're doing safety trials, and whenever all that we can release all that information. Yes, my goal is to go to FDA approval with this.
Mm-hmm. Actually, on that, Pamela asks, will we be able to read anything about her work, meaning published papers, anything like that? Would you say something about that?
I have one paper published. It's a concept paper, but the publication right now to get funding, we're looking at investors, and investors are very we're doing all types of things with technology. There's many things going on, but I think right now they're holding me off. I'm hoping to be able to publish soon. The significance of the work is something that we're working with, and when to release it and what's the best timing. So I'll be sure and let you know as soon as believe it or not, I already have 3 publications written up, ready to go.
Oh, wow. Okay. So we're just waiting for a publication. Is that what that is?
Yeah, we're waiting for the timing.
Okay. All right. Well, we can't say what the timing is then, but it's coming, folks. So at some point we'll be able to actually, those papers will be in public. So that'll be great. Shirley asks, is there anything you could add about working with animals? Have you done any of that, or would it be just as valid on animals?
Actually, that's what my case studies. Yes, animals respond as any living cell, plants, animals, and humans. And I have worked with some animals.
Wow. Could you give give an example of an animal work that you've done?
Well, mainly it's been with human pets. Just the animals, pets, and I really can't speak to. I don't have any. Some of them, everybody would know who I'm talking about. I probably shouldn't say
Okay.
animals, but I can tell you that animals have symptomatic relief from disease processes and the same effects we see in humans exactly.
Okay. In your work with the people you've done sessions with, is there any kind of a time period that you begin to where they report that the changes begin? Is it immediate sometimes? Does it take several weeks?
Immediate, yeah. There's some immediate changes. Yes.
Okay.
Like the first bath, they can report sensing of things, and everybody's different. I like to say that women tend to have more of an effect, feel it sooner. But I have some male people who use it as well, and they feel things too. So, but sometimes it seems like the guys get in and go, "I didn't feel anything," but the women usually always feel something first. Now, the sicker the male, the more they feel.
Mm. You're trying to say that women have greater sensitivity to their body?
Possibly. I mean, I guess there's no clinical trial, but this is big, kind of young, tough guys. I didn't feel anything, but I think if they were to continue, most of them, sometimes their wives, go, hey, you don't complain about your knee anymore like you used to. They forget. And that's the thing with this technology. Once you use it regularly, like most of you probably know, that it's when you stop using it that all the things that you forgot about that bothered you prior to using it come back. So sometimes we continue to use it and we don't realize how good it makes you feel until you leave the machine. I remember I took a trip over to do a talk, and I was overseas for 10 days, and I didn't take it with me. It's the only time, one of the only times, the longest time I've gone. And I got over there, and sure enough, 5 days into the trip, I get a flu. And I was so upset, and I thought, oh, I will never travel without my machine again. And I so wanted to get a bath. And so, I thought, I really missed that machine. I think we're going to be doing in about 20 years, we're going to be doing trials to how to wean yourself off this thing. Once you start using it, it's so addictive.
Oh, that's good. Hey, Steve, are you on the line?
Yes, Michael, I'm still here.
Okay, good. Everyone, I'm bringing Steve on board here. Steve is the founder and originator of the Aqua Chief Foot Bath. And I know you've been listening, so wanted to see if there was any questions or thoughts that you had as you were listening.
No, I think Marcy did a really great job explaining it. It was pretty clinical for those of you that like some of the harder details, and I think she put some stuff into some pretty plain language as well. I thought you did a great job, Marcy.
I think a lot of people.
I don't know,
yeah, a lot of people, have really wanted, that, because it's, as Marcy said, there's so much anecdotal. There's been decades of people reporting it, but we haven't had the opportunity to have that hard data, and that's just what Marcy has brought. So I think that's great. Hey, Jennifer and Alice, I see you raised your hand. If you could type into the chat what you wanted there. And Pamela makes a comment. We were talking about the body and, how you listen to your body. Pamela suggests that's why we need to keep a journal, so that when you're not feeling well and you do your session, you can make notes about those kind of things. Now, there's another question. Let's see. This is a Deidre. That's a pretty specific medical question. So I think I'll read the second half of it. Is every other day a good day, a good to start rejuvenating the cells to help heal? And I won't even say what the condition is, but the idea is, they're asking for advice on, how often to do the session. Every other day is what is recommended in a general sense. Have you given sessions daily? Is there a reason why you would have done that? And that's for Marcy.
Is that question aimed to me, Mike, to Marcy?
To Marcy, and then you could comment if you want, Steve.
I've treated cells daily in the lab, and it hasn't harmed them.
Okay.
So, but I can't make that recommendation until I do clinical trial animal models.
Okay. Steve, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, what it is with the every second day, because everybody is a little different. And so what we have to do is we have to define a clear window so people can operate it confidently. And with all the work that we've done over the years, what we've decided is that particular window is a very good window for the general population, so that nobody's going to run into any problems, and it's a very good schedule to follow. And you're going to actually see some results following that schedule versus trying to mix it up and create your own.
Okay, that's a good addition there. All right. Let's see if we have anything else. Jill says, I used this every day for months when I first got it, and it helped me tremendously. And despite Michael telling me only every other day. So, Jill, I'm glad it helped you.
I've heard that many times.
Yep.
But that's, like I said, that's something that's up to the user, the intuitiveness of the user at this point. There's no science backing up anything with that.
But one thing is clear is that there was nothing in your research that suggested that if you did use it more frequently, that it's going to hurt you in any way. So whether it's given, yeah, exactly. So whether it's it's up again. If you feel it, then do it.
Right. And the thing that I went into the lab, remember my original goal was to show that it doesn't do any harm to a cell. And I thought if I could look at a cell down to the genomic level and see any type of adverse effect, then that would concern me of to be using this long term. I have yet to see anything in vitro long term or anything anecdotally, but we'll get into that. That's part of the safety trial we're doing. So.
Okay. Steve, is there anything else that you had, Steve?
I think Marcy did a great job pretty much covering all of that.
Okay. Well, Marcy, we're going to talk a little about that new model. You're welcome to stay on and join us and talk more if you'd like, but you have been very gracious with your time. So if you need to leave, that's fine too. So
I'm just going to listen. I'll check out. I've enjoyed everything. Thanks for having me. And I look forward to bringing things more to light in the future.
Absolutely. We'll be waiting. We'll be looking. Okay. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So, by the way, people, this is being recorded, and you'll be able to just click on the same link that you used to join it to go back and listen to watch it again. So just keep that in mind. Again, we've been joined by Marcy Purnell for the first part of our session here today, and that was just pretty amazing. I've been looking and waiting. It's been at least a couple of years for me, and it's really just great to hear all the work that's been done with that. So with that, I'm going to move to our next topic, which is the new foot bath, the TC 5000, which on Monday replaced the Model 5400. And what I know is that this is the foot bath has been improved internally. That allows it to not only operate more robustly, which explains a 7-year warranty now, but it's been tuned in a way that would allow you to use it for 20 minutes rather than what was recommended as 35 minutes previously. So that can work well for practitioners who are trying to deal with multiple patients or customers and the like. So I'll just we're going to open it up for people who have questions about the new machine. But Steve, I'll first ask you to talk a little bit more about it and see if you can shed any more light than I have on.
Yeah, certainly, Michael. Well, you were right. I heard you mention earlier that it has been quite a few years since we have brought out a new model. But we have been working during those years on various different upgrades, which are now in the new machine to improve it. And like you said, we've really increased its robustness. And so that's why we've increased that warranty too, so that we really do have the leading warranty now.
Yeah,
we have kind of kept the outside the same though, because it has really done well over the years. And a lot of the machines that are out there that are like 10, 15-year-olds are still working. And so we didn't want to change that part of it. And also we didn't want to change the controls, because everybody that's used to it can still feel comfortable operating it, even though we've made these internal upgrades.
Okay. There's still more questions, so I'm going to throw them in as we're speaking, so we can make sure everybody is addressed here. Jill was asking, she said, my friend who got me interested in this does her feet for 35 minutes and then her hands for 20 minutes for her arthritic hands. Is there any benefit to doing your hands directly if you have arthritis versus just putting your feet in the bath? And Steve, you could answer that.
Absolutely. That's something that we would always recommend if you are actually trying to treat something like arthritic hands, for example, is to actually use your hands in a hand bath versus a foot bath. Because the actual original technology was actually designed to be used in a whole bath where you could just hop in and get your arms, your legs, and your feet in there. But because not everybody had a bath, we had to come up with another way. And so the foot bath evolved out of that. But along the way, the hand bath did evolve as well. And so the unit can actually be just as effective with a hand bath as it can be with a foot bath. But if you did have arthritis in your hands, putting your hands in there can increase the effectiveness for your hands slightly. So in other words, it's a little bit better. You would still see the effects through your entire body if you're using your feet. But like I said, if you wanted to treat something like that, then the hands would be a great way to do it.
Okay. All right. We're getting this question by Jill about, this is actually technically how you clean up the basin. Said, oh, Michael, you said on a webinar how to clean the tub if you do a bath. I can tell you probably what I said, and that's that you use a paper towel with some CLR, which is what most of you use to clean your modules, and just wipe with the CLR. It will remove the rust colored rings that you might have on the basin. So moist baby wipes probably wouldn't do it, Jill. Any other questions? Okay, let me just see here. Dialysis, can't talk about that. Sorry, Shayla. Let's see. Okay, it looks like we've gotten through most of them. Let me just see if there's anything else real quick. Nope, that looks like it is. Last chance, folks. Type into the chat if you have anything else you wanted to ask. We're just a little bit over an hour now, so this is probably good timing if you don't. Okay, Jill says, if you do a bath, how long should you soak in it? And Steve, I'll kind of add to this question. You did mention that with the new unit, you can do 20 minutes instead of 35. If people wanted to do it for 35 minutes and continue to do it, is that okay? Is 20 minutes going to be just as good as 35 minutes?
20 minutes will be as good as 35 in most cases. Now, you can go to 35. Some people prefer to go there. But normally, the 20 minutes is going to be sufficient for everyone. Now, if you wanted to go longer, for example, if you did say set it for 35 minutes because you wanted to try and do a long session, and then, of course, you'd set the timer for the 35 minutes, and then it would actually turn off after the 35 minutes. Now, once the timer turns off, you could actually remain in there longer.
Okay.
But not with the unit running. So in other words, the unit would actually turn itself off. But then you could just sit and stay in the bath.
Okay. So there's probably some benefit to just staying in the bath after it turns off?
Well,
I know it's charged water, so
that's a really
why.
difficult question because some people might say that they get a benefit and that's great. But technically, in terms of when you actually look at the science of the charging of the cells and stuff like that, to actually validate that, we haven't actually been able to validate that in terms of all that extra time, with the machine off.
Okay. Okay. On another brand, they're asking, they have a different foot bath, I guess. And they say stay very still in the water. Does it matter with the Aqua if you move your feet around while you're having a session?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not.
Right. So
You can, if you actually, even if you're in a tub, you could roll around all over the place. The rule is just don't get out of the water and then get back in it, so long as you're maintaining contact with the water.
Okay. Thank you. So there's a question about diabetes. It's a specific condition, but I'm just going to say, speak for myself, that over the many years that I've been taking calls and listening to people, the diabetic condition known as neuropathy, which affects your feet quite frequently, I've heard dozens and dozens and dozens of times. So people have relief for that condition. Whether it does anything more than provide relief, I'm not sure, but I do know that, there are so many different conditions that people have had who reported being helped with it. So can't speak more specifically than that, but that's trying to help to answer some of the questions. Steve, are you talking about just the new machine, or are you saying that the old machine running for 20 minutes is just as good too?
Well, the old machine is a little different from the new one, and the 20 to 35, you can potentially get away with 20 minutes with the older machine, but if you want to be sure, then you're probably better off running with the new machine, because people are different. Now we're going to take in a much wider scope of the population with the new one for the 20 minutes than people who potentially could use it for 20 minutes with the old one.
Okay. Does the new unit require as much salt? I notice seems responsible for the demise of the rings. So I guess Sandy is saying that too much salt is not good for the rings.
Right. The more salt you put in, and then if you try and turn the machine down, the more ring wear you're going to get. Now, because you're only using it for 20 minutes, you are going to see less ring wear. Now, you're probably going to see a lighter color because there's going to be less ring wear. But you're going to be better off if you're looking at the financials of it, in terms you're not going to be changing the rings as often because you're not running it as often.
Okay. Jane asks, would you see a difference between using hot water from a gas heater versus a electric water heater?
In terms of what it's actually going to do to your body,
yeah.
No.
Okay.
You may see some variations in some reactions in terms of potentially the color and the person using different water sources, because that really is a different water source because you're treating it in two different ways.
Okay.
And just to add to the last question, I do believe I missed part of it about how much salt you have to add. The actual adding of the salt, all that's really doing is it's changing the conductivity of the water. So the salt requirement for the TC5000 and the older Aqua is going to be very similar. And because you're going to get slight water changes all the time, in terms of actually measuring, you're probably not going to notice much difference.
Okay. Here's an interesting question from Deidre. She asks, she's a reflexologist, and she does reflexology on one foot while the other foot's in the bath. Now, I'm thinking that if she's doing that on both feet, that one foot is in the water all the time, and then when the other foot goes back in, the other foot comes out. Never had that question before. Deidre, that's a first. Thank you. Steve, how would you answer that?
Well, that goes into one of the golden rules. Only one person in the bath at a time. If you're touching somebody while somebody is in the water running, that is just like you being in there with them. And I would highly recommend not to do that.
Well, Deidre, I think that means you want to do it after the bath, if you're going to, or before. But when you put your hands on someone when they're in the bath, you're basically creating an electrical circuit with yourself, which may not be what is needed for that person. I don't know for sure, but I think following what Steve said is probably the best thing to do, and that is leave the people in the bath untouched, let them do their bath, and then do any massage or reflexology before or after. Okay. Let's see. Am I missing other ones here? Sandy, I'll just add my tidbit about the salt. And this goes for the new unit, the old unit. People put too much salt in the water because they don't put it in a bit at a time. So the best thing to do is to turn on the machine and point it to max on the dial. Then just put pinches of salt at a time, let it dissolve. And then that's the way you're going to get the best conductivity with the least amount of wear on your ring sets. All right, let's see if there's anything else. Okay, this one's come up, Steve. You can address this one. Is there a different kind of salt? Sea salt, regular salt, Himalayan salt? Matilda asks.
Well, over the years, we've experimented with many different salts, and also we've had a lot of feedback from people using all kinds of different salts. The salt that we would prefer people to use is just your regular, normal type Walmart salt, because really the salt is, once again, only to get the conductivity of the water up. In other words, it's to get the correct power flow through the module, the part that goes into the water. And it doesn't really play a role in what's happening in your body. So, you know, using the Himalayan salt and the rock salts, and some people do have problems because some of those salts are a little coarser. And when they're setting the units up, when the salt is a little coarse, it can take a little bit longer to dissolve in the water. And so sometimes people have trouble trying to get it stable. So I would recommend just your regular table salt.
Okay. The only thing I'll add there is if you can, get a fine table salt and it will dissolve easier in the water rather than the big crystals. Okay, that's just a tip. Diana asks, I don't have any salt that I use in my well water. Is that okay?
That's wonderful. You've got great water. If you don't have to add salt, that's great.
Okay, so there you go. Diana, you don't have to add salt. If it's working, just keep doing what you're doing. Pamela, I don't use any salt either. Nope. You're okay if you don't. If you can get a lot of water has natural sodium in it, which gives you the conductivity that you need. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Steve.
Yeah, the natural conductivity would always be the preference. However, that is difficult to find, and you're very lucky that you've got water that is right in that range.
Okay, very good. Let's see. Any other questions? We're at an hour and 15 minutes, and I think we're probably going to wrap it up here. I'll give it 30 more seconds, and then, Gary has a question. Why is it best to have the machine at max? How does reducing the power affect the results?
Well, the way that the power control is designed is when it's on max, it's actually operating with an open circuit. And what that means is that the power is not being restricted by the physical device itself. In other words, because you've got your feet in the water and the water is conducting the power, it's an all natural process. So when you add more salt to it and then turn it actually down, what you're doing is you're physically altering a voltage amperage relationship, and you're kind of like restricting the power flow. It's kind of like choking it a little. Now, it still does work, but it is going to drop the efficiency percentage slightly.
So it's saying it in another way is the best treatment happens when you have it set to max with just the right amount of salt to get the reading at 2.5 or between 2.5 and 3 on the meter. Is that correct?
Right. That's correct. That's going to be the optimum way to operate the device.
By the way, is the new machine also run at the same recommendations as far as the setting on the meter?
It is.
Okay. Pamela says, so will that affect, wait a minute, will that affect the cord if you don't have it at max? I'm not sure I understand the question, Pamela. but the cord meaning the white cable that connects the module. Is that what you're asking? I'm not sure there. If you could provide a little more. I don't think it's going to affect anything as far as the cord or the electronics of the device is concerned. Steve, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, Michael, you're absolutely right. The cord is not going to be affected by altering the power control. Really, what you're affecting is the actual output of the device internally, which is driving the actual array.
Okay. Panel says no. The cord that gives power. Yeah, we answered the question there. Doesn't have any effect on that at all. Gary says, what's the results we can expect versus the old machine? I don't know if have we had enough time pass for that, Steve?
Well, in terms of the actual efficiency, we have increased the efficiency. In terms of the actual effects, what we're actually looking to do is, we've decreased that actual time period, which means that you can reduce that wear. You will actually probably see a little bit of a color drop. It's going to help you clean up. And so overall, we're actually trying to increase the efficiency, and it's going to sort of be a little bit more stable in terms of a treatment.
Okay, yeah, I think I wanted to address this too, because I had questions prior to the event with people asking, well, is this going to make my old machine obsolete? Is it going to work so much better that my other machine will be ineffective? And I think what I heard from your answer is that the properties are very similar between the two machines, and that its effectiveness should be similar. Is that right?
Well, the machine that everybody has now is absolutely effective, and the way that they're operating it, they absolutely should continue to operate, because I believe everybody's probably running their machines at the 35 max limit, and as some people reported, they've even gone over. So what we were trying to address here is to actually upgrade it so that we could refine that window back to that 20 minutes, so that we can operate there confidently, versus having this big window where we know the effect is going to be.
Okay.
So it's also going to reduce the amount of time you have to spend doing it, so you've got more time to do whatever else that you need to do. Okay.
All right. T asks, and I can answer this, T, will we be able to order parts for the old model? Well, the replacement parts are going to be, they work with all models. Well, at least two models. The very first model, I don't know if anybody still has, but the Aqua ring sets will work on any model. So there's going to be no problem with that you have to worry about that it's obsolete, that you won't be able to get parts or anything like that. They share the same replacement elements, so there's no problem there. Gary asks, is there any difference in frequencies between the two machines? That's for you, Steve.
The actual frequency component that the machine is dependent on, it is actually being driven by the person who has their feet in the water. In other words, we're not actually trying to stimulate the body with any kind of artificial frequency. We're actually stimulating it with a signal that's being fed back in to the system through the module, or obviously through the water, then into the module and back into the machine. We do tend to try and stick with a compatible harmonic, but we are not specifically using a specific frequency to control or to do anything with.
Okay. All right. I want to mention, and this is just for this week. So if you're watching this live, this applies to you. If you're watching the recording, it's probably we're over this. But for this week through Friday, we are offering the new unit at the same price as the old unit. So what that means is that the old units were priced at $15.95 for the Pro unit. and $13.95 for the standard. The new model is $17.95 and $15.95. So for this week only, you can get that, the old pricing plus any discount that you have as an owner. So there would be no difference in terms of how you have traditionally had your discount there. Come next Monday, though, the new pricing will be in effect across the board. So just letting everybody know that, so that if you wanted to upgrade or get another machine, you can do that. A couple more questions, and I think we're going to wrap it up. Gary says, I muscle test many people at 51 minutes. And that means for how long he's running the session, I believe. And he gets great results. Is there any reason that you would disagree with that or recommend against it?
Well, I definitely recommend against it. Running it for 51 minutes, when we set the 35, we set 35 minutes to be inside a very, very, very safe window. Running it past that, while you may get good results, that may not be the case with everybody. So you could potentially run into a problem by exceeding that, and because that wouldn't be great for the person. So I would definitely recommend not doing that and staying inside this safety window where we know there are no side effects and it is safe.
Okay, so I kind of get two sides to that question. One is that you are kind of asking the person or asking the body of the person what's best for them. And so, I personally wouldn't say, hey, you have to dismiss it based on a number. But I guess you say you test many people. That doesn't mean everybody. So, I would say my read is that if you can keep it within the window that Steve is recommending, that's probably better. But, if someone's testing for something longer, maybe there's a reason. So nobody can answer that for sure, but that's my take on it. So with that, I'm going to, we'll close out the session this evening. Again, we've been talking about first our interview with Marcy Purnell. She earned a doctorate in her bioenergetic work with the Aqua on cancer cells and DNA, things like that. If you've just tuned in, please come back for the replay. You can get all of that. We also talked about the introduction of the new model, the TC5000. And I thank everybody for your input. It's always good when you have everybody active and asking questions. Jill, we'll sneak one more in, and then we're going to end it. It says, I think it's Tennant's work that talks about how our bodies need a certain electrical charge. And I think that is what this machine gives. So I believe the body takes what it needs. And I agree with that. How about you, Steve?
Absolutely. And that's the actual premise of the whole technology, to actually be able to deliver that charge. And once again, going back to the whole concept of the human battery charger. And that's what we're doing. It's how we're doing it. And that's spot on what you're saying here.
Well said, Jill. And with that, we'll end the session. So thanks again, everybody. Feel free to come back to that same link to watch the replay. That'll be available probably in an hour or two. Okay. Thanks, everybody.